Sampling is defined by the internet's most reliable source as the reuse of a portion or sample of a sound recording in another recording. There's plenty of laws surrounding copyright and fair use, and the whole legality of acquiring someone else's sounds to use in your sound. It's most often seen in music when one artist uses another artist's piece of music in their own. Usually it's a somewhat recognizable melody or instrumentation taken directly from the original recording. But what happens when somebody really doesn't want their song to be sampled? In 1997, a German electronic band and a German rapper began feuding over a 2-second sample of banging metal. This multi-decade saga has more or less ended, and it raises plenty of good questions about the morality of sampling and crediting artists. The German electronic band in question is Kraftwerk, formed in the late 60s by Ralf Hütter and Florian Schneider, among others. The band is considered pioneers of the electronic genre, and was pretty influential on a bunch of bands in later years. About 2 decades later comes the German rapper Sabrina Setlur. She had her breakthrough in the mid-90s and is one of the most successful female rappers in her country. Kraftwerk released its album Trans-Europe Express in 1977. One of the songs is the instrumental Metal on Metal. 20 years later, Sabrina Setlur, under the production of Moses Pelham and Martin Haas, released the single Nur Mir. I think you see where this is going. The clanging metal from Kraftwerk is looped as part of the instrumental in Sabrina Setlur's song, and that did not sit well with Ralf Hütter. Kraftwerk is no stranger to sampling. The band dealt with an unauthorized sample of their album track Numbers on the song Planet Rock by Afrika Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force in the 80s. There was some legal trouble involved, but it eventually got sorted. Other popular songs sampling Kraftwerk in the 2000s were Coldplay's Talk, using the riff from Computer World in its chorus, and Fergalicious by Fergie, using a part of It's More Fun to Compute in its bridge. The thing is, those 2 songs had permission to sample, Moses Pelham didn't, and that's why he ended up in court. Hütter and Schneider raised concerns over their song being used without permission in 1999. Thus began a decades-long legal battle. In 2008, the Hamburg courts ruled in Kraftwerk's favor, claiming that the unauthorized partial reproduction and distribution of phonograms infringes, in principle, the rights of phonogram producers. Pelham had interfered with Kraftwerk's exclusive right to reproduce and distribute their song. It didn't matter that the sampled portion of the song was a simple rhythm, it was recognizable enough to be infringing on the copyright. Additionally, the beat was used throughout the entirety of Nur Mir, so it was considered to be appropriating the whole song. Every part of the original Metal on Metal was entirely created by, and subsequently belonged to, the band. The court said that even a person who samples the smallest parts of sounds from someone else's phonogram interferes with his entrepreneurial effort. So that was it, right? Kraftwerk wins and all the copies of Nur Mir have to be destroyed and damages be paid? Well, not quite, as it carried into the next decade, and in fact took a turn Kraftwerk certainly did not want. The year was 2016, and Pelham and Haas had the Federal Court of Justice on their side. Freedom of artistic integrity was the main point raised, as the mere possibility for artists to invoke a right to free use of a phonogram under certain circumstances does not generally entail a disproportionate restriction of the core of the phonogram producer's right. Summarized in simpler terms as, hey, maybe Kraftwerk was overreacting to this sample. If copyright holders were so strict on their works, then it might be a financial risk or artistic restriction for people who wish to use those works as a sample. Plus, it was claimed that there was no evident risk that the plaintiffs in the initial proceedings will suffer from a decline in sales through the adoption of the sound sequence. For a moment, Kraftwerk lost their battle, but they didn't. In 2019, the Court of Justice of the European Union took Kraftwerk's side and said that Nur Mir did use an unauthorized sample of Metal on Metal. Even such a small part of the song still falls within the exclusive right granted to the producer of such a phonogram. The CJEU determined that sampling was still an artistic expression, and itself was not a problem. But if it was going to be used in an unmodified way, then the producer could prevent someone from doing so. Don't get too excited for the end of this video yet though, because in 2022, a new EU copyright law was created. Online content for the purposes of caricature, parody, and pastiche could be communicated and distributed to the public. The definition of the word pastiche given to the courts finds the Metal on Metal sample falling within it. The problem is that it isn't a super clarified definition. So does the sample truly fit? And would people recognize it as a pastiche? So it looks like Pelham v. Hütter hasn't quite ended yet, and who knows when it will. Regardless, it has raised plenty of good questions about sampling and its morality and legality.